In the quiet province of Gyeonggi, just an hour from bustling Seoul, lay the city of Hwaseong. In the late 80s and early 90s, this place became synonymous with chilling fear. The seemingly ordinary and peaceful lives of the local populace were shattered by a series of brutal murders, shocking and devastating the nation. This period became known as the Hwaseong serial murders, becoming one of the most mysterious and painful crimes in South Korean history, leaving a deep scar in people's hearts. During that time, South Korea was experiencing a period of rapid economic growth, often called the miracle on the Han River. This miracle brought prosperity, but, as often happens, it also exposed deep social rifts. Traditional values, a patriarchal way of life, and a strict hierarchy seemed firmly in place, while new ideas, unprecedented opportunities, and, alas, new previously unknown forms of crime began to penetrate society, sowing chaos and confusion. The first murder, which began the Hwaseong nightmare, occurred on the 15th of September, 1986. The victim was an elderly woman, 71 years old. She was found raped and strangled in her own home, which had become a place of death. The unfortunate woman's body was discovered by her own relatives, forever etching that terrible day into their memories. The police launched an investigation, but alas, the methods of the time left much to be desired. Evidence was gathered carelessly, examinations were superficial, and modern techniques like DNA analysis were unheard of. Further murders followed with frightening regularity, sowing fear in the hearts of the townspeople. On October 19, 1986, a young woman was found raped and murdered. On December 12th of the same year, a teenager became the victim. The criminal, like a phantom, slipped through the streets, leaving no trace, acting boldly and calculatingly. His actions demonstrated complete disregard for human life, and his cruelty shocked even the most seasoned police officers who had seen everything during their years of service. In those years, despite economic growth, the Korean police were poorly equipped, and investigative methods were often primitive and ineffective. The search for the criminal was complicated by a lack of resources, rampant corruption, and the absence of modern forensic technology, which further complicated the already difficult task. Public pressure mounted, the people demanded justice, but the police, as if mired in quicksand, kept faltering, unable to make headway in the investigation. The residents of Hwaseong lived in the grip of constant fear. Women were afraid to leave their homes without company, and children absorbed their parents' anxieties like a poisonous fog. A suffocating atmosphere reigned in the city, permeated by anxiety and widespread distrust. Every creak of a door, every rustle outside the window brought a chilling premonition of disaster. The criminal, nicknamed the Korean Zodiac because of his mysterious elusiveness, continued to sow death. His victims were women of all ages, often belonging to the most vulnerable segments of society: young workers, caring housewives, elderly women whose lives were drawing to a close. The crime scenes were usually located in the vicinity, far from prying eyes, on the shoulders of abandoned roads or in secluded corners of fields. The 2nd of May, 1988, became a fateful day. Another victim fell. Her ravaged body was discovered in a field, her life cut short, and her honor trampled. The 77th day of autumn that year, the 7th of September, 1988, brought a new tragedy. A young woman was found dead, her body disfigured, her soul likely departed from her earthly form forever. On the 16th of September 1988, another tragedy unfolded. A young girl was discovered in a roadside ditch. The crimes grew ever more horrific, and the villain bolder, as though feeling completely in control. Investigators, working tirelessly, combed the area, questioned hundreds of witnesses, and meticulously gathered evidence, but their efforts seemed in vain. They lacked crucial evidence, and chaos reigned in their work. The case, like a treacherous swamp, swallowed up more unsolved mysteries. In those days, Korean society, bound by conservative values, shamefully hushed up cases of sexual assault. Victims and their families chose silence, making investigation nearly impossible. On the 29th of July, 1989, the criminal struck again. His victim was a young woman, slain with a brutality that chilled the very blood. On November 15th, 1989, death struck again. The fifth victim. During this period, April 21st, 1990, another life was cut short, again a woman. October 25th, 1990, another murder, and once more, a woman. With each new victim, fear, like icy shackles, gripped more and more hearts. The police, under immense pressure, scrambled in desperate attempts to track down the monstrous killer, but all efforts shattered against a wall of impenetrable mystery. Local media, like vultures, circled the city, highlighting these crimes and fueling an atmosphere of widespread terror. Newspapers blared headlines, detailing the horrifying specifics. People, holding their breath, read these articles, discussing them with trembling voices in public places, in their homes, where every rustle of sound brought a start. The radio and television, like a bellows fanning a fire, poured fuel onto the flames, constantly broadcasting new details and advancing more and more theories, some of them utterly insane. Amidst this atmosphere of widespread panic, even the slightest detail could instantly transform into ominous rumors and spawn the wildest speculations. In 1991, as if by a gesture, the string of these horrifying crimes abruptly ceased. The final victim was a young woman murdered on the 3rd of April. This time, the perpetrator left behind far more evidence, including several items of clothing discarded at the crime scene. At first, this discovery offered investigators a fragile hope that they were about to catch the killer, to corner the beast. But alas, no miracle occurred. The investigation bogged down in a morass of unsolvable questions. The case was closed, and the cruel Korean Zodiac remained unpunished, a shadow gliding through the streets. Over the long years of investigation, more than 3,000 people were questioned, and over 200,000 fingerprints were meticulously examined. Yet the criminal was never found. Investigators put forth dozens of theories, attempting to find any clue: demonic possession, bloody revenge, a severe mental disorder, but none of them led to success. The Hwaseong serial killings had become a symbol of the Korean police's professional incompetence, a silent reflection of deep, corrosive social issues. Years passed, one after another, and the case remained unsolved, shrouded in dark myths and gruesome legends. The public never received an answer to the agonizing question that increasingly echoed in the night. Who was this merciless monster murdering women in Hwaseong? The police did not give up, but all attempts to reopen the investigation, bring in new investigators, and utilize modern technology proved fruitless. The case hung like a dead weight, a verdict against the entire law enforcement system. Meanwhile, fundamental changes were occurring in Korea. The country was stepping into the age of digital technology, and new approaches to crime investigation were being developed. Progress in criminology, especially in genetic analysis, opened up unprecedented possibilities. In 2003, the Korean government amended the legislation, allowing for the review of cases where the statute of limitations had expired if new evidence emerged. This instilled hope in the hearts of the victims' relatives and investigators that justice would prevail. In 2019, 30 years after the last murders, the unbelievable happened. Thanks to advancements in DNA technology, law enforcement managed to identify a suspect. It was Chun-Jae, already serving time in prison for the rape and murder of his sister-in-law. And here, perhaps, begins the most dramatic part of this story. Imagine decades of utter darkness, the merciless pain of loss, shattered hopes, and then suddenly, a blinding flash of truth. DNA samples extracted from Lee matched the evidence found at the crime scenes in Hwaseong. This was a cold shower for the entire country. Chun-Jae, a quiet, unremarkable man whose grey eyes seemed to reflect the blandness of everyday life, was the elusive killer who had held Hwaseong in fear for years. He was a serial killer, a monster who remained free for years, continuing to commit heinous crimes, one more terrible than the last. The initial shock was replaced by fury, and then the deepest despair. How could this have happened? Why hadn't they stopped him sooner? Why couldn't the police solve these crimes? The questions, like a tolling bell, tormented tens of thousands, demanding answers. During the interrogations, Chun-Jae confessed to all the murders in Hwaseong. He also admitted to other crimes, including rapes and assaults, shocking the investigators. It turned out his criminal activities were far more extensive than initially thought. He confessed to murdering 14 women and to committing over 30 rapes and attempted rapes. His confessions revealed a horrifying picture of brutality and impunity, difficult to comprehend. Chun-Jae began describing his motives as if recounting something commonplace. According to him, he felt a painful attraction to women, but could not control his base desires. He chose his victims at random, as if playing a mad game, often acting under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He detailed how he planned his crimes, how he selected the locations for his acts of violence, how meticulously he disposed of evidence, hoping to remain unpunished. His confessions were cold, devoid of the slightest hint of remorse, which only amplified the horror of his deeds, as though the devil himself were recounting his actions. Soon it became known that in 1989, a man named Yoon had been convicted in connection with one of the murders. He spent a full 20 years in prison before being exonerated. Chun-Jae, meanwhile, confessed to the murder for which Yoon had initially been falsely accused. The case was reopened, and Yoon was finally acquitted. This tragic error exposed the incompetence of the police and the judicial system. The news of Chun-Jae's confessions sparked a wave of outrage in society. People demanded just punishment, condemning the police's inaction and insisting on reform of the law enforcement system. The murders in Hwaseong were once again in the spotlight, sparking widespread public outrage. Society craved answers to every question, demanding justice. A new investigation commenced, its goal to uncover all the circumstances surrounding these monstrous crimes. Investigators gathered evidence, questioned witnesses, and meticulously examined the case files. But the more they learned, the more horrifying the picture became. Lee Chun-Jae was revealed to be a cold-blooded killer who had remained unpunished for many years, and his actions had brought irreparable consequences to countless people. In December of 2019, Lee Chun-Jae was sentenced to life imprisonment. This sentence was only a formal consolation for the grieving families of the victims, as no punishment could bring their loved ones back. The sentence was also a bitter admission of the failure of the law enforcement system, its inability to protect its citizens. Soon after the sentencing, details about Lee Chun-Jae's prison life began to surface online. He remained calm, showing not a shred of remorse, and continued to deny any wrongdoing. Furthermore, he even wrote a book about his life, portraying his crimes as the consequence of an irresistible force. The Hwaseong serial murders became a genuine turning point for South Korea. It forced society to deeply consider the role of the police, the function of the judicial system, and, no less importantly, the attitude towards victims of violence. As a result of these events that shook the nation, new laws were enacted and reforms implemented. These were designed to improve the work of law enforcement agencies and significantly strengthen the protection of citizens' rights. The case served as a harsh reminder that crimes committed even many years ago never truly fade from memory. It demonstrated that even after long decades, justice could prevail, and those responsible would face their deserved punishment. The lives of the people affected by these tragic events were forever altered. The relatives of the victims were forced to live with the unbearable pain of loss, enduring fear and burning anger. They endured every stage of the grueling investigation, every endless courtroom hearing, clinging only to the faint hope that justice would finally prevail. For them, uncovering the killer's identity was not just about finding answers to agonizing questions, but also a fragile opportunity to begin the slow healing of their emotional wounds. The police officers and investigators who worked selflessly on this complex case also faced their own personal tragedies. They worked tirelessly, giving their all to the investigation, but remained without results for many years. It took them 20, perhaps even 30 years to reach the truth. Now that the killer was caught, the realization of the scale of past failures began to surface through the relief. Society had profoundly changed. The Hwaseong serial murders exposed blatant social problems: the poor protection of women's rights, the inefficiency of law enforcement, and the disregard for the victims of crimes. After the discovery of this series of murders, public opinion underwent fundamental changes, leading to improved living conditions for many people. The Hwaseong murders case remained forever one of the most well-known and complex in South Korea's history. It became a symbol of the fight for justice, a reminder of the importance of thorough investigation and faith in the triumph of truth. The solving of this case provided a powerful impetus for the revision of many aspects of Korean society, including the roles of the police and the judiciary and the treatment of crime victims. Despite the fact that Lee Chun-Jae was caught and sentenced to life in prison, many questions remained unanswered. It will forever remain a mystery what went on in the mind of this man, what pushed him to make such a terrible choice, to commit 10 brutal murders. Just imagine the nightmare. The fear that tormented the residents of Hwaseong for a long 15 years is now forever etched in history, reminding us of the tragedy experienced by this small town. The shadow of these crimes will linger over us, reminding us of itself for many generations to come, like a dark omen. It will torment the memory of the cruelty, the pain inflicted, and the suffering of innocent victims, reminding us of the importance of the fight for justice. The long years of investigation, stretching over decades of agonizing searches for answers, seemed to lead nowhere. All this was for the sake of the illusory hope of somehow easing the suffering of the people whose lives were cruelly broken. But will this pain ever subside? Will it ever be possible to heal these deep wounds?